Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare Krishna.
Welcome. Thank you all so much for joining today. We have a very special guest, His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. Let's give you a big round of applause. Chaitanya Charan Prabhu does not need any introduction, but still for my own purification, I will say a few words about Prabhu. Prabhu has been practicing Bhakti Yoga, Krishna consciousness over 25 years. He is a disciple of His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj. He is a mentor, monk, speaker, author of 25 books on mindfulness, and also author of 3500 daily inspirational meditations on Bhagavad-Gita, and is invited speaker at TEDx, Microsoft, Google, Intel, UNESCO, you name it. These are just a few organizations I'm mentioning. And also he gives 400 talks every year. 400 talks every year, 100 cities across 4 continents. So we are very fortunate to have him here. So again, one more time, let's welcome Prabhu by saying Hari Bol.
Haribo!
ॐ ज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकाय चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी इति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. Happy to be here with all of you today. And what topic should I speak on? Actually, I'll tell you a secret. Whatever topic you will say, I'll speak on the same thing. Okay. So, I was planning to speak on the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. And we'll focus on one verse. I'll tell the meaning of this verse. It's one of the fairly confusing, at the same time, inspiring verses. So if you go beyond the confusion, you get to the inspiration. If you forget the inspiration, you get the confusion. So let's look at this verse. So I'll tell the meaning, then we'll recite it, and then we'll discuss it after that. So this is 9:30, towards the end of the Bhagavad-Gita's 9th chapter. And in many ways, this verse actually demonstrates the mood of Krishna in the Bhagavad-Gita. So, api chet suduracharo. Api chet means even if. So, achar is behavior. Durachar is improper behavior or bad behavior. Sudurachar is especially bad behavior. Even if there is especially bad behavior, bhajate mam ananya bhak. That person, bhajate, is devoted to me, unswervingly, ananya bhak, without deviating emotion. Actually, bhak means more of not just emotion, but disposition. We'll talk about bhajate mam ananya bhak. Then, sadhur eva samantavya. Such a person, now sadhu can mean two things. Sadhu can mean saintly, sadhu can also mean good. Sadhu, that's well done. So basically, good or such a person is to be considered, mantavya, to be good or even saintly. Samyak vyavasito hi saha. Samyak, completely vyavasito. The determination, vyavasito is determination or intention is well directed. Because of that, the person is considered well situated. So let's recite this verse. Api chet suduracharo bhajate mam ananya bhak sadhureva samantavya सम्यक् व्यवसितो हि सः अपि चेत् सुदुराचारो भजते माम् अनन्यभाक् साधुरेव समन्तव्यः सम्यक् व्यवसितो हि सः अपि चेत् सुदुराचारो भजते माम् अनन्यभाक् साधुरेव समन्तव्यः सम्यक् व्यवसितो हि सः. Would anyone like to recite? अपि चेत् सुदुराचारो भजते माम् अनन्यभाक् साधुरेव समन्तव्यः सम्यक् व्यवसितो हि सः.
अपि चेत् सुदुराचारो भजते माम् अनन्यभाक् साधुरेव समन्तव्यः सम्यक् व्यवसितो हि सः.
Thank you.
अपि चेत् सुदुराचारो
भजते माम् अनन्यभाक् साधुरेव समन्तव्यः सम्यक् व्यवसितो हि सः. अपि चेत् सुदुराचारो भजते माम् अनन्यभाक् साधुरेव समन्तव्यः सम्यक् व्यवसितो हि सः. Thank you. So, I'll talk about this verse in three broad parts. First, what this verse means in the Bhagavad-Gita's context for Arjuna. Then we will talk about what the verse means broadly in terms of the teachings of the Bhagavad-Gita. And lastly, how the verse applies to us. So contextual, textual and universal significance of the Gita. So let's begin with the first part. Now, at any time during the talk, please feel free, if you have any questions, to ask questions. Okay, and I'll feel free to not answer them. What I mean is, if that question is not immediately relevant or that question is going to be answered later in the talk, I'll answer later, otherwise I'll answer at that time. So now, as we know, the Bhagavad-Gita is spoken by Krishna to Arjuna when Arjuna is overwhelmed. So why exactly is Arjuna overwhelmed? I have several PowerPoints, which I'll try to make some powerful points. So yeah, let's see if we can find something. So this was Arjuna's dilemma over here at the start of the Gita. Oh, interesting. Okay, good. So Arjuna had the ethical dilemma at the start of the Gita. You know, Arjuna is overwhelmed, is unable to fight. And we talk about many of the reasons what Arjuna gives for not fighting. And sometimes what is not telling is telling. That means what is not being told, if somebody is not speaking something, that can speak a lot. So what I mean by that is, many people think that, oh, Arjuna had to fight a big war and he lost his nerve. He felt afraid. Sometimes young new soldiers go on a big war. New people, they are hired into the army, they go on a war field and they see so much enemy, they get scared. So was Arjuna scared like that? Not at all. How do we know that? Because in the entire first chapter, not even once does Arjuna mention any fear of his own death. Not even once. So it was not a case of nervousness or cowardice. Although Krishna says the world will think like that. Somebody who is on the battlefield and refuses to fight, the world will think like that. But that is not Arjuna's reason for not fighting. What is Arjuna's reason? He is not sure about what is the right thing to do. And At that time, he is confused. So he's torn between two duties. One is his Kula Dharma and the other is his Kshatriya Dharma. The Kula Dharma is his duty to his family, his dynasty. He has to protect his family members. His Kshatriya Dharma is that he has to punish those who are aggressors, those who are wrongdoers. He is a martial guardian of society. So imagine there's a high court judge who is very fair, very upstanding, and punishes the criminals and releases the innocent. And that person has come for, such a judge has come to the court, and they find that there is a criminal in the stand, or accused in the stand, and that accused is accused of murder and is likely to be sentenced to death. And the judge finds that the accused is his own son. Now what does he do at that time? Does he do the duty of a judge or do the duty of a father? So Arjuna is torn in that dilemma. And what should I do? Should I fight or should I not fight? So that it's not, for Arjuna, it's not just fighting or not fighting. It is Prichhami Tvam Dharma Sammudha Chetaha. I ask you, what is Dharma? Dharma here means not religion. Dharma means what is the right thing to do? What is the right thing to do? That is his question. And Krishna answers that question at various levels. First, he talks about Karma Yoga, where he says that get your emotions out of the equation. He says act as a duty. So he says that if you are a judge, or if you are playing an official role, do what is required. And he says if you act with detachment, you will grow in wisdom like that. That is Karma Yoga, initial answer. He says that. So he says that you have to do your duty, putting aside your personal emotions. But then after that, he talks about Bhakti Yoga. And in Bhakti Yoga, Krishna says that Suhridam Sarva Bhutanam Gyatva Mam Shanti Nuchyati. He talks about Bhakti Yoga at various levels. In the second chapter itself, he mentions it. Fifth chapter, he mentions it. And for the seventh chapter, he goes deeper and deeper into it. But in the fifth chapter, he makes a key principle that Arjuna may think, there are Bhishma and Drona and there are so many of my relatives over there. How can I kill them? I can't. So Krishna tells Arjuna that you think you are their well-wisher and you will do good to them by not fighting. But he says, I am their greatest well-wisher. And I want what is the best for them. So if you are concerned about Bhishma and Drona, they are circumstantially trapped on the side of evil. And because of that, they are obligated to do something that their heart doesn't want them to do. They have to do it. If you fight and do your duty, they will be released from this circumstantial entrapment, this circumstantial obligation. And because they have lived virtuously and they are eternal souls, they will be elevated to a higher destination. So you are going to do good for them. Even Duryodhana, say he will be killed. It's like somebody who is a criminal with a very dangerous weapon. Then that person, if that dangerous weapon is taken away, then they can do far lesser harm. Isn't it? So he says Duryodhana is also a soul. He is also a pure soul. There are atheists. And what is the definition of atheist? Yes, atheists don't believe in God. And Krishna says, Yatha mam prapadyante. So atheists don't believe in God and God doesn't believe in atheists. Now what does that mean? That God doesn't believe in the atheism of the atheists. God sees that they are also my precious parts. They are also pure at their core. That atheism is just a temporary covering. So Krishna doesn't think, you don't believe in me, I'll destroy you. That is not the mood of Krishna at all. I want to benefit even you. So Krishna is the benefactor even of Duryodhana. But the way he will benefit Duryodhana is by, at that particular point, disempowering him. Because he has a powerful position, that powerful position has gone to his head. So he's a soul, he's also part of Krishna. But because of that position, he has become intoxicated. So take away that position, then intoxication will go away. So Krishna tells Arjuna, if you understand that I am the well-wisher of everyone, even those on the opposite side, then Gyatva Mam Shanti Nuchyati, you will gain peace. You will gain peace because you will understand that my will is for the good of everyone. And if you harmonize with my will, you will be doing good for everyone. And this is where Krishna brings in the principle of Bhakti Yoga. So Karma Yoga is, okay, this is my duty, I'll do it with detachment. But Bhakti Yoga is that this is my service to God and I will do it with attachment to God. I will do it with attachment to Krishna because I am convinced that doing this will please Krishna. And in that context, if we consider, what does this verse mean? Okay. I think I have to stop the PowerPoint first. Okay. So in this context, Krishna is speaking in a rhetorical way. If you are acting as an instrument for me, for my will, then apichet suduracharo. Krishna is taking two cases over here. That even if you think that fighting against your elders, fighting against your guru, against your grandfather is a terrible thing to do. It's a terrible thing to do. But bhajate mam ananya bhak. If you are doing it with the intention of serving me, then sadhur eva samantavya. Then you will be considered saintly. Because your intention is good, your determination is good. You are well situated. So what happens is, we often decide what to do based on how the world will perceive our actions. And that is one factor which needs to be considered. Some people say, I don't care what the world says about me. And they care whether the world hears them say that or not. They want to proclaim their independence from the world. And they want to hear the world to hear that I am so independent. So actually we are social creatures. And we can't live without caring for the world. But how much do we care for the world? It's like now I give classes all over the world. There's one place, I won't mention where, there is one devotee who comes and sits right in front. And throughout the class, he glares at me. Not even stares, glares. And it's extremely uncomfortable. Even if there is some humor, there is no laugh at all. It's just glaring. So the only way I can give a class is by look at everyone except him. So now, if there's one person behaving strangely, even that is uncomfortable, but we can overlook it. But suppose if I speak something and every single one of you start glaring at me, then it's quite likely that I have spoken something objectionable. Isn't it? We can't completely not care for the world. So the idea is, we have to be mindful of the world's perceptions. Mindful means aware. But we don't have to make our mind full of the world's perceptions. That should not be the only factor in our decision making. How people are perceiving us matters. But if we speak only so that people will be pleased with us, then we will become a panderer. And we won't be able to do any good for them or even for us, ourselves. But we need to be aware. So Krishna is telling Arjuna over here, yes, some people may perceive that you are doing something terribly wrong. But I know, I declare, mantavyaha, Krishna is instructing, such a person should be considered saintly. Because even if that action is considered, even if that action is seen as reprehensible, it is done with a devotional intention. And that is why it is not only not wrong, it is good. And then Krishna takes another alternative, that he says that if suppose this action is wrong, not that it is considered to be wrong, Sudurachara, not just the world is thinking it is Sudurachara. Even if this action is actually wrong, but still what will happen is, because you are acting with devotional intention, next verse says, Kshipram bhavati dharmatma shashvat shantim nigacchati kaunteya patijanihi name bhakta pranashyati. Krishna says, soon such a person will become virtuous. Kshipram bhavati dharmatma. Arjuna's question was, Prichhami tvam dharma sammudha chetaha. So, Yeah. Kshipram bhavati dharmatma. This kshipram is quickly, without much difficulty, without much delay, that person will become dharmatma. And shashvachantim nigachyati. That person will attain enduring peace. And therefore Arjuna declared that my devotee will never perish. Name bhaktaha pranashyati. So in this way Krishna is assuring Arjuna. And the same is the mood at the end of the Bhagavad-Gita. Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma shuchaha. Krishna is telling sarva papebhyo, that whatever wrong may happen or whatever wrong you think may happen when you are practicing bhakti, and you are serving me, you are surrendering to me, I says, I will free you from all sinful reactions. So here, this is the mood of Krishna, that you are, Krishna is saying, you are confused. You think you may make a terribly wrong choice. It is not a wrong choice. But even if it is a wrong choice, I will take care of it. I will ensure that things won't go wrong. So that is the contextual explanation of this verse. Yes, please.
You said we're free to ask questions. If how Krishna see the Muslim terrorists who commit this most abominable act, they destroying others, because they feel that they are not serving God properly. Like in this.
They feel they are not serving God properly. Or
Yeah, because terrorists, the Muslim terrorists, they feel that they not serving God the way they should, because they not Muslim. So they
feel others are not. Okay.
Commit this terrorism.
Okay, yeah. Well, there are some questions which further the topic of the class, and some questions which take the topic of the class further away. So this question is like that, but it's a question which is already asked and it can't be unasked. So let me try to answer it. But I guess I'll change the topic of the class then. It's a good point. It's a relevant point. So what? Can you wait for some time? Yes. I'll just briefly go to the second part, and then third contemporary relevance part we will come to this. So in this first I talk about contextual relevance, then the textual relevance. So in the textual relevance, here Krishna is talking about the glory of bhakti. And his emphasis is that we can have many paths in our life. And he says bhakti is the universally most potent path. Now some people say that the Bhagavad-Gita teaches that all paths lead to the same goal. I'll talk about this later. And when Prabhupada was asked this question, Prabhupada said, if that were the case, then why does Krishna have to speak the Gita at all? Isn't it? Whatever Arjuna does, Arjuna is going to come to Krishna. Whether Arjuna fights, Arjuna does not fight, then he will still come to Krishna. In Arjuna's crisis itself is made meaningless. His crisis is, what is the right thing to do? And if all things are the right thing to do, then what is the point of the crisis? It just doesn't make any sense. So that is not the teaching of the Gita, that all paths lead to the same goal. Yes, Krishna does. The Gita is inclusive. Inclusive means it does say there are many paths, and many paths can take us toward the ultimate reality. And I'll explain how that works in the last part. So the Gita is inclusive, but it is not so inclusive as to make itself meaningless. What do I mean by that? See, we all need to be open-minded, but we can't be so open-minded that our brains fall out. So ultimately, minds are like mouths. Just like a mouth has to be opened to take food in. But for the food to be of any good, the mouth has to be closed. Isn't it? If the mouth is always kept open, the food will be of no use. So similarly, the mind has to be opened to take up new ideas. But after it has to be closed, not closed in the sense of becoming narrow-minded, but closed in the sense of being committed. Committed to understand this, committed to try this out. If we don't do that, then we won't benefit. Like if somebody is sick, and say we had this COVID pandemic, and there was a lot of the whole thing became politicalized afterwards. But there's a whole backlash against, say, alternative forms of medicine. And these are all hoaxes. They're all administered by quacks. It could be some of them need not be. But if somebody is open-minded, they can try, okay, mainstream medicine, allopathy is not working, let's try something else. But they keep exploring, but eventually you have to take some medicine. You can't just keep exploring this, that. I'm so open-minded that I'll explore every medicine. Okay, a part of exploring is taking the medicine. Just keep exploring and don't take anything, it's not going to benefit. So we have to be open-minded, but open-minded does not mean empty-minded. Open-minded doesn't mean that the idea comes in and goes out, nothing stays in. The mind cannot be completely open. The mind has to take, it should be open to take things in, not open to just let things pass away from inside out continuously. So the Gita doesn't say all paths lead to the same goal. There are many paths, and many paths can help us grow spiritually. So the Gita is inclusive, but it is not inconclusive. It has its own conclusion. Sarva dharman parityaja mam ekam sharanam vraja is a conclusion, very clear conclusion. Krishna accepts the validity of many paths. At the same time, he puts various paths in a hierarchy. And he says Bhakti Yoga is the highest path. That does not necessarily mean Krishna condemns those who don't follow Bhakti Yoga. Not at all. Krishna appreciates follows other paths also as sometimes as wise people, as transcendentalists, as persons pursuing higher reality. But his recommendation is clearly Bhakti Yoga. So, in the 9th chapter, Krishna is emphasizing the glory of Bhakti Yoga. In fact, Krishna in many ways speaks about his glories so that he can glorify Bhakti Yoga. Krishna is not speaking his glory so that I understand how glorious I am. No, the point is, Krishna's a central element of bhakti is to direct our love towards the Lord. But how can we direct our love towards the Lord if we don't know his glories? And that is why he speaks bhakti. He speaks about his glories to inspire devotion within us. And in that connection, he speaks broadly 4 things, 4 characteristics of bhakti in this particular chapter. First, it starts from, from 9:20 to 22, Krishna talks about the eternality of bhakti. That other paths give temporary results, but he says, this was Ananyas Chintayanto Mam Yajana Paripasat, 9:22. He says, other paths, you can go to heaven, but you will fall back again. The results are temporary, these results are eternal. That's one thing. Then the next thing he says is, this is simplicity. That Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam Yome Bhaktya Prayachati. That's 26. So eternality, that's one characteristic. Then simplicity, it's another characteristic. Then he talks about this particular verse, that apichet suduracharo bhajate mamanimah. Here he talks about the potency of bhakti. That even if a person does something wrong, still bhakti will purify that person. It is not like other paths, you do something wrong, you are dismissed, you are destroyed. And then lastly, he talks about the universality of bhakti, where he says that even people who are considered low-born, even they can practice bhakti and they can also be elevated. So, in this way, Krishna is actually emphasizing the glory of bhakti in multiple ways. So we can say that this is, I have a whole class on this topic. That's what I plan to speak today and tomorrow. But you made me yoga bhrashta now. You deviated me. So this, so I talk about the acronym. I use user for this. Use universality, simplicity, then eternality, and reformability. That every single person can be reformed by the practice of bhakti. So this is a whole topic in itself. But what Krishna is doing over here is, he is emphasizing the glory of bhakti to Arjuna. That this is what will give to Arjuna and to all of us. And in that connection, he says reformability. Every single person can be reformed. Yes, sometimes they may be deformed, they may do terrible activities, but they can be transformed. And that is the great potency of bhakti. So in general, as I said, we are social creatures. So we relate with people. And we can say that the greatest hope for us in our relationships that people can change for the better. And the greatest fear in our relationships is that people may change for the worse. So that hope and fear is always there in all our relationships. And how can people change for the better? Yes, people can use their willpower, they can use various methods. But bhakti, Krishna says, is the most potent process. And that's how a person can change. Now, having said this, this verse itself, it raises a contradiction, which I'll try to address, and then we'll move to your question. So, this verse has, if we look at the way our acharyas have analyzed this verse, and even Ramanujarya and others have analyzed, elaborate analysis. The first is, it has a very striking contradiction in this verse. If somebody is that fixed in their devotion, bhajate mamananyabha, samyak vyavasito hisa, if they are that fixed in their devotion, how can they do a terrible action? How can they do suduracharo? How is that even possible? Either you say if you are doing terrible action, you are not fixed in devotion. If you are fixed in devotion, you will not do terrible actions. So the two seem to be contradictory. So how are the two to be reconciled? So one is, as I said, it's rhetorical. Krishna is telling Arjuna, even if you think your action is terrible, still you will be well situated. And that is the explanation that some acharyas give. This is simply meant to glorify the potency of bhakti. Like Mahaprabhu says to, I think Srivas Thakur, that even if the goddess of fortune becomes poverty stricken and she has to go house to beg, still there will never be any shortage in your house. Now that is a rhetorical statement. The goddess of fortune will never become poverty stricken. But or it says that Naham vasami vaikunthe yoginam hrudayeshuva yatra ayanti mad bhakta tatra tishtami narada. That I am not situated in the Vaikuntha, I am not situated in the heart of the yogis. I am situated wherever my devotees glorify me. Now is this literal? Is it that Lord is not there in Vaikuntha? Is it that if we get liberated, we go to Vaikuntha and say, hey, Krishna is not here, what happened over here? Not like that. And is he not in the hearts of the yogis? Actually, sarvasya chaham hrudi sannivishtu. He is there in everyone's heart. But the emphasis of this verse is that in these places, either we can can't reach those places, or even if we reach, we can't perceive the Lord in those places. But where the Lord is glorified by his devotees, we can perceive his presence. Tatra tishtami narada. That I am present there, you can perceive me over there. So these are rhetorical statements. They are meant to make a particular point. They are not meant to be taken literally. So that's one understanding. That this is a rhetorical point to glorify bhakti. But another understanding is that sometimes a person may have some terrible conditionings from the past. Or sometimes because of one's past karma, somebody may be exposed to a terrible temptation. And that may create such a force that that person maybe get swept away, may fall. So to explain this, we could take an example from Shastra and then we'll look at it from a conceptual perspective. So the example of this which the Acharyas give is of the Mohini Murti tempting Lord Shiva. Now Lord Shiva is a great personality. He's the greatest of the, apart from Vishnu, he's the greatest of the Devatas. And he was with Parvati, and then he saw Mohini Murti who looked like a very seductive damsel. And he was with his own wife, but he completely forgot about her and started chasing after her. And he chased after her till that infatuation that went away from him. He released his seed and then the infatuation went away. Now we could say this is Suduracharo. That just to chase after a woman and chase after a woman in front of one's own wife, and not only that, when he is supposed to be a guru and his own disciples and his worshippers were there, this is a terrible action. But the test was that after that happened, Lord Shiva didn't focus on, oh, how humiliating, what a terrible thing. His focus was not on self-consciousness, his focus was on Krishna consciousness. He says, nobody could have tempted me like this. It is only Lord Vishnu who could have tempted me. How glorious is he? So his focus was not on his infamy, it was focused on Lord Vishnu's glory. And that's the meaning of bhajate mam ananya bhag. Now, of course, in this case, we can say that the temptation was created by the Lord himself. But still, a suduracharo kind of action did happen. But still, sadhureva samantavya. This is a pastime in which Lord Shiva is glorified. That he's such a glorious person. Not that he chased after Mohini Murti, but he did not let the humiliation block his Krishna consciousness. That is his glory. So now what can happen to Lord Shiva because of the Lord's arrangement may happen to us because of Maya. So to understand this conceptually, say we are all in the Bhavasagar, in the ocean of material existence. And in this ocean, we are all subject to waves. Mohor Mimale, in Mukundmala Sutta, he said that there are many, many waves that keep coming, Urmi. That they come not just a wave, but a series of waves. And many of those waves may be such that we can resist them. Yeah, they come, we resist them. But some waves may be so huge that it's impossible to resist them. No matter how strong a person might be, or if a giant tsunami kind of wave comes, what can a person do? They'll just get swept away. And we don't know what kind of waves will come in future. So if such a wave comes and a person gets swept away, and that's how a person who seems to be in very good standing may also fall away at times. But Krishna is not just at the end of the ocean on the shores of immortality. Krishna is there in the ocean as an anchor. And that is why if we are to overcome our unhealthy habits or unhealthy conditionings, we can't focus so much on, no, I will not do this, I will not do this, I will not do this. Because what happens is, we will keep saying, I will not do this, I will not do this. Our mind will sneak in with an eraser and erase the knot. I will not do this, I will not do this, I will not do this, I will do this. We will end up doing it. So it's like the wave will come and the wave will sweep us away. But if we focus not on fighting against the wave, but on holding on to the anchor. We just hold on to the anchor, the wave may still hit us. And it may still hurl us. But if we hold on to the anchor, we won't be flung away by it. So that's why Mam Chayo Avyabhicharena Bhakti Yogena Sevate Sagunan Samatityaitan Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpati, Krishna says. If you practice firm bhakti, then you will not be swept away. That's how Krishna says. Now, but sometimes we may say that, okay, somebody practice bhakti firmly and still they may get swept away. But the wonderful thing is that Krishna is the anchor who extends throughout the ocean. He's not just at one place. So even if we get swept far away, Krishna as the anchor is still there. And we can again hold on to Krishna. And that is the meaning of here, bhajate mam ananya bhag, or samyak vyavasito hisa. That person has a strong intention to hold on to the anchor. But sometimes the wave hits in such a way that the person gets swept away. But as soon as the wave subsides, immediately that person holds on to the anchor. And therefore, sadhureva samantavya. Therefore, that person is well situated. So Krishna focuses not so much on how far we get swept away by the wave. Krishna focuses on whether we are holding on to the anchor as soon as we can. And that is why he is saying, sadhureva samantavya. Yes, you are not becoming so self-conscious that, something's so terrible, what will people think about me? And I can't do this, better let me just go away from here. What happens in religious circles, there's a lot of prestige associated with morality, and there is also a lot of humiliation or infamy. There is fame associated with morality and infamy associated with immorality. And in some ways it is good that if somebody is behaving morally, then if people who are behaving morally are respected, then that is the impetus for behaving morally. And people who are behaving immorally are disrespected, then that is the impetus, that is a deterrent from behaving immorally. So in one sense it is good. But if that becomes the sole criteria, oh, people will disrespect me, so why should I practice bhakti? Let me just go away from here. Then we are giving more importance to respect from the world than our connection with the Lord. So if somebody is not doing that, that means they really have humility. They are putting Krishna above their ego. And that is what pleases Krishna. Therefore, not just I tolerate them, I accept them. Krishna says, I consider them well situated. Because they have shown by their actions that they put Krishna above their ego. Now that doesn't mean everybody has to go through this. Certainly not. We shouldn't. What is it? If it happens, then sadhureva samantavya. So this reveals Krishna's heart. Krishna is telling, I love my devotees so much that I overlook their faults. Even if they do something wrong. Now we may say, why did the past conditioning come? Or in an ocean we can say that the wave just comes by its own arrangement. We can't control it. We don't cause it. Now we can say that in our lives, when the wave comes, the waves of temptations come, in one sense they are due to us only. They are due to our past karma. Maybe not our present karma. Right now we might be living purely, but in the past we have lived in particular ways. And when a big wave of temptation comes in our life, that is a result of some past karma that we had done, because of which we are subjected to that. So in one sense, we are responsible. Not from this life's perspective, but from a previous life's perspective, we are responsible. But Krishna doesn't focus on that. You did this, so you suffer this now. No, Krishna says, you want to connect with me, I am there to help you. I will purify you. Kshipram bhavati dharmatma shashvachantim nigacchati. And that is why, this conceptual part, let me see, I'll show you a couple of. So often we think of this as, if we think that somebody is following rules, then they are Krishna conscious. And if they are not following rules, okay, if they are following rules, they are Krishna conscious. And if they are not following rules, then they are not Krishna conscious. That's what we think. This is like a stereotype understanding. But actually speaking, what is Krishna consciousness? Krishna consciousness can include both. I may follow rules and be Krishna conscious, and I may not follow rules and I can still be Krishna conscious. Why? Because it's my heart wanting to go towards Krishna. Maybe because of my circumstances, my conditionings, I may not be able to follow the rules. But still one can be Krishna conscious. So Krishna consciousness is broad enough to include even those who are not able to follow certain rules or practices of Krishna consciousness. And that's why sometimes even if we fail in following certain rules, following certain standards, we can fail, but we can fail well. We can fail well. We don't have to say farewell to Krishna. So how does this work? I won't go through this whole PowerPoint. Let me just, So what we understand is, there is following rules and not following rules. So there is, somebody may be following rules and then they fall. So there's a seeker who falls. But this is one kind of fall. This is falling in Krishna consciousness. And this is falling out of Krishna consciousness. So we may fall, our conditionings may make us fall. That means the waves may come and sweep us away. But we can still hold on to the anchor as soon as that wave stops. That is falling in Krishna consciousness. But somebody says, I can't follow the rules. What is the use of practicing bhakti? That's why having a 1-0 kind of understanding of bhakti, digital logic, Bhakta means, devotee means he has to do all these things. If a devotee can't do all these things, what is the use of being a devotee? You're not a devotee at all. We shouldn't have such a 1-0 kind of understanding. So somebody may fall, but they don't have to fall out of Krishna consciousness. So our conditionings can make us fall. But if we fall out of Krishna consciousness, it is not because of our conditionings. It is because of our choices. We make that choice. And conversely, this is you could say somewhat a scary but humorous part also. Normally we think that somebody is not following rules and start following rules. So they are rising in Krishna consciousness. But somebody can rise out of Krishna consciousness also. What does it mean? That means they start following rules, but then they become very proud of following the rules. And then they're following rules not so that, the purpose of following rules is so that the world's temptations don't distract us and we can focus single-mindedly on Krishna. But we are following rules so that we can lord it over others. All of you are so attached. I am so detached. Say somebody is fasting Nirjala on Ekadashi. And then they go to the kitchen and see who all are eating what all. Such an attached person, such a glutton, such a useless person. So what is happening is, they may be fasting Nirjal, but their their body is fasting and their ego is feasting. So they may be rising out of Krishna consciousness. I'm not saying if you have the capacity, please fast Nirjal. That's not the point over here. We don't think that, oh, if I fast Nirjal, I'll develop an ego, so better I'll not fast. Not like that. That is not the point here. If we have the capacity, certainly we can fast. But the point is that rules alone, adherence to rules alone, doesn't necessarily mean we are Krishna conscious. And that is the exam, that is seen in the 10th canto of the Yogic Brahman pastime. They are following the rules of the ritual very nicely. But they were so proud. We are such important Brahmanas. We are doing such a big sacrifice. That they were not conscious that Krishna had come to them. Krishna had sent his messengers, his cowherd boys to them. So they rose, they were strictly following the rules, but they rose out of Krishna consciousness. So when Krishna is saying Apichet Suduracharo, he is saying that yes, sometimes you may fall down, but you don't have to fall out of Krishna consciousness. And if you don't fall out of Krishna consciousness, then I consider you well situated. And because they are in Krishna consciousness, they are still in Krishna consciousness, Krishna says they will rise. Krishna consciousness will purify them. Kshipram bhavati dharmatma. So this is the broad understanding of Krishna's heart over here. Krishna is assuring Arjuna and all of us that don't be afraid. In the case of Arjuna, it was not conditioning, it was conditions. Because I have to fight against my elders, how can I do that? But Krishna says, don't let your conditions or your conditionings make you hesitate in your practice of bhakti. Yes, the conditions or conditionings may get us into trouble, but Krishna will get us out of that trouble if we just hold on to Krishna. And that is how he is emphasizing the potency of bhakti over here. So yeah, this is the textual significance of this verse. Yes, please.
The Shipram Bhavati, how soon will that happen? Will it take many lifetimes or what is the meaning of the...
Yes, how soon will that happen? Well, it's very difficult to put a time frame on, we could say, on purification. Because it's that we ourselves don't know how deep the conditionings are. So, two people may have the same conditioning. Say for example, two people may be alcoholics. And both of them say start practicing bhakti. And one of them just gives up alcohol very quickly. And the other person keeps struggling for months and years. So is it that one person has greater willpower? Well, maybe, maybe not. Because also, generally, whenever somebody succumbs to a bad habit, the conditioning or the habit itself or the addiction itself is one thing. But underlying that is a coping mechanism. One is succumbing to that because one is coping with something unfriendly, something unfamiliar, something not unfamiliar, something unpalatable. So suppose somebody is a social drinker. They drink because they want to belong to the cool crowd. And such a person, they may have started drinking like that and they kept drinking and eventually they became hooked to it. But such a person starts practicing bhakti and now they come in the association of devotees. Now to belong to the association of devotees, they don't need to drink. In fact, giving up drinking is conducive for them. So what were they coping with through their drinking? It was the fear of loneliness, fear of rejection. And when they found another way to deal with it, this drinking just fell away. But suppose somebody else is drinking because that is their coping mechanism for emotional disturbance. When they become stressed, when they become agitated, when they become worried, then that's where they start drinking. Now for such a person, they may have to wait till they find out in bhakti some other way to deal with that emotional disturbance. Otherwise, whenever they get emotionally disturbed, they get angry, there's that word called hangry. Hangry is, when you're hungry, you become angry. So hangry. So there might be that might be their way of coping. And unless they find a healthier coping mechanism, just raw willpower may not help. So this is just we could say it's a more psychological analysis than spiritual analysis. But I'm giving this as an example to illustrate that different people may require different time durations. So sometimes we need to be patient with ourselves, sometimes we need to be patient with others. That some people may not be able to give up particular conditioning for a significant amount of time. But still, If they are intending to practice bhakti, then they need to be given that facility. Does that answer the question?
So you are saying about rules and conditions means it's actually that for regulatory principles or any other things. And
Yeah, four regular principles are something, but there could be like it's well, okay. Rules is a very narrow word. Suppose we expect that if somebody is a devotee, then they should be able to become free from anger. They should not get angry. They should not yell at others. So that's a reasonable expectation. But we don't know what somebody's past conditioning is. I was talking with one devotee who was very short-tempered, and he's a leader in the community, and the devotees get very disturbed when he gets angry. But then he told me that he grew up in a family where the only way you could get things done was by yelling at others. It was a dysfunctional family. So he said that when I see that people are not doing things, I think this is the only way I can get things done. So he may apologize later. Other times he's very kind and sweet. But at that time just gets angry. And is it that bhakti is not working? Yeah, bhakti is working. But it may take more time to work on a particular conditioning for a particular person. So what I'm talking about is not so much rules as certain expected standards of behavior. So we may expect a devotee should be polite and sweet and kind. And yes, that's how bhakti will transform many people. Most people we can say. But maybe not everyone. Does that answer your question? Yes,
How to focus on Krishna consciousness when we face humiliation? Okay, sometimes it's easy, the intensity of humiliation is sometimes it will ease, so we can easily focus on Krishna consciousness. But sometimes the intensity is so much that we are so disturbed and we just want to close ourselves, and we keep thinking of the humiliation. So how to help ourselves to focus on Krishna?
Yeah, okay. I also spoke in a black and white way over there. That there is there are two things over here. So like we said, like appreciation and praise or fame or glorification. So as devotees, we are told, don't expect any respect for yourself. Amani. But then we are also told Manadena. And this applies not just to us, it also applies to others. So what it means is that we are told not to expect respect, but others are told to respect us. And others are told don't expect respect, but we are told to respect them. So it seems to be almost contradictory. So Prabhupada reconciled this by saying in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita that humility means to not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. That means yes, others may honor us, but we are not anxious about it. Will they honor me or not? You could put it to such as in other ways, humility means to accept respect but not to expect respect. Yeah, if as a part of the culture, as a part of but we are all part of particular hierarchies. If we are in a particular position in a hierarchy, others will offer respect. So we accept that respect, but we don't expect that, we don't demand that. So now why do we accept respect? Because sometimes respect can be an expression of the heart. Now when we love someone, we have affection for them, we offer the respect to them. So that's why when we appreciate devotees, appreciation can feed the ego, but appreciation can also nourish the heart. Because when we are appreciated, you may say that, oh, I am such a great person, and now you are recognizing how great I am. What took you so long to recognize my greatness? That would be feeding the ego. But if somebody appreciates us for doing something, you can also see that as, okay, so Krishna has gifted me with this ability, and I am doing this service, and it's going well. So it's an indication that from Krishna, through his devotee, that I should do this service more. So it can nourish our heart also. So why am I talking about this is that when we are humiliated, so what is exactly happening? Is it simply that our ego has been smashed, or is it our heart that has been shattered? It could be both. So that means, say, somebody from whom we expected kind words. We expected some appreciation and encouragement. And they publicly criticize us, condemn us in harsh words. So it's not so easy to say. Is it simply our ego that was smashed, or is it our heart that was shattered at that time? It could be either. And important thing is that our heart has to be offered to Krishna. So a shattered heart cannot be offered to Krishna. We have to put the pieces of our heart together, then we can offer it to Krishna. So there may be some healing needed from that wound. And when somebody is, as you say, humiliated, see, the word humiliated itself is associated with the word ego. But let's use the word somebody is publicly disrespected. It could be because they did something wrong or because they were misunderstood, whatever it is. Then it takes some time to process it. And during that time we may need either be alone ourselves, or we may need to be with someone who loves and supports and affirms us, encourages us. And then slowly we can afterward deal with that situation. So, and then we can find out, okay, this is what actually happened. We introspect, we pray. So sometimes the inner wounds have to be treated like outer wounds. What do I mean by that, treated like outer wounds? Suppose somebody gets a fracture. Now their hand is fractured, they can't lift any luggage. Now you say, come on, you're not your body, Prabhu. Just lift it. Yeah, I know I'm not my body, but my body is not working right. So, just as sometimes the outer body, we can have outer wounds. And yes, we may be able to lift the suitcase, but we need to recover before that. And that recovery will involve two things. First is some withdrawal. Just put your hand in the sling, don't move it around. And afterwards, then slowly start moving the hand. So like that, sometimes when we are hurt internally, then we may need to withdraw. So like, okay, I'm withdrawing into, not exactly into a shell, but we need to protect ourselves. And then gradually we re-engage with the world. That is okay. That's just being human. But where somebody just refuses, somebody says, puts their hand, somebody doesn't put their hand into a sling at all. That everything is fine. All that they're going to do is, they're going to worsen their wound. And then their hand may become completely dysfunctional after some time. So if we are hurt and we just act as if everything is alright, maybe at that moment we can do that. But there are some people with whom we need to be vulnerable. There are some people with whom we need to be able to share our heart. And on the other hand, if somebody just forever keeps their hand in a sling, well, that's also not how will you function. So yes, there is a time for withdrawal and recovery, but then after that the time for re-engagement also. Now how exactly we'll do that, when which phase will end, which will begin, that will vary. So in that book about Srila Prabhupada's pre-ISKCON journey, what is that book called? By Daivi Shakti Mataji? No, anyway, that book is when Prabhupada decided to leave his home. We know that famous incident, tea or me, he told his wife. So, but I said that after that, Prabhupada went to one of his godbrother's ashram, and for days together, he was just chanting constantly. Just constantly chanting all day. Prabhupada said that Prabhupada just stay in his room, come out for darshan and aarti, and he just go back and chant. So his godbrother asked him, so his godbrother says, Swamiji was taking that big decision in his life at that time, to take sannyas. So he had to deal with that. For him, maybe just think it was just such a great renunciation. But for him, he had taken care of the family throughout his life. And to give it up, he didn't expect actually that his wife would actually choose tea over him. It was a shock for him. He was renounced and he renounced the world. But here, it was a shock. So Prabhupada also had to process it. Okay? Yes. Yes, Prabhu.
So, what is the role of guilt? That is, when we, like you were saying, that
Yeah.
we focus on ourselves and all what we have done wrong. So, is there a balance between taking shelter of the anchor and feeling guilty about so that?
Yes. It's an important question. So, guilt is like a psychological defense mechanism from harmful actions. It's like we have physical defense mechanisms. If we go very close to fire, then we feel an unbearable sense of heat. And then immediately what happens is, say if this is very hot and I move my hand like this, my hand goes there, immediately my hand moves away. It's a reflex action. And that protects me from danger and damage. So what applies at a physical level also applies at a psychological level. When we feel guilty, that means what is happening? Hey, don't do this. That from something from inside us is pushing us away from that wrong action. And in that sense, guilt is good. But the nature of Maya is that, it's like, nature of Bhakti is that everything can be used in Krishna's service. The nature of Maya is that Maya will use everything in her service. So everything that can be used in Krishna's service can be misappropriated by Maya. So what happens is that what do you mean by everything can be used in Maya's service? Let's suppose we memorize verses and we quote verses. That's very good. They're very purifying, they're edifying, they establish our authority. But if somebody is quoting verses with the Ishwar Bhav, just see how much I know. I have Krishna's words at my command. Well, Krishna's words are that we should be at his command. So if we are quoting verses with the Ishwar Bhav, then what is happening is, we are quoting Krishna's words, but actually we are being used in Maya's service to Krishna's words. So similarly with respect to guilt also, what can happen is, if we consider this metaphor, say this is V. This is the right action, or this is Krishna, and action that takes us toward Krishna. And this is the wrong action. So put it this way. And we want to go, so we don't want to do this wrong action, we want to do this right action. So guilt should come here, where it stops us from doing the wrong action. But sometimes what happens is, guilt comes here. It comes here, between us and the right action, between us and Krishna. That means you start thinking, I did something wrong, so what is the use of practicing bhakti? So if guilt is coming between us and Krishna, then we have to see that it is not guilt, it is Maya masquerading as guilt. Like one devotee told Prabhupada, Swami, in the early days, 1965-66, Swamiji, you came in my dream and told me to take drugs. And Prabhupada said, it was not me, it was Maya in my garb. So, Maya in my garb, it was the illusory energy dressed like me, appearing like me. He came and she was misleading you. So what happens is, and generally we understand temptation means anything that takes us away from Krishna. So if guilt keeps us away from Krishna, then we have to see guilt also as a temptation. It is an act of Maya, which is keeping us away from Krishna. So guilt should stop us from wrong actions, not from right actions. And if phalena parichayate, if we start saying, I'm feeling so guilty, I did like this, I spoke like that to this devotee and it's such a terrible thing. Therefore, better I don't go to devotee association only. Because if I go to devotee association, I'll offend devotees. If I offend devotees, I'll fall down. That's like saying, I ate bad food and therefore I got a stomach upset. Therefore, I'll stop eating all food. No, the point is stop eating bad food. So similarly for us, guilt, if it stops us from doing the right thing, then that is pseudo guilt. That is Maya coming in the form of guilt. I need to avoid it. And how much should one feel guilty? Well, that differs from person to person, in the sense that if one does something wrong and doesn't feel guilty at all, that's a dangerous situation to be in. Because then we may just thoughtlessly keep repeating the wrong. And we may apologize also, nonchalantly. He says, like one person goes and slaps the other person. He says, I'm sorry. He says, why do you apologize 3 times? For the slap that I'll give you tomorrow and day after. So, you're not feeling bad at all. So guilt should be there. Guilt should be there, of course. But if guilt sort of starts consuming our consciousness, and guilt loses no place to think about Krishna, then that becomes dangerous. So anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjana. So if you're feeling too guilty in the sense that we just feel completely de-energized to do anything at all. And if we are around people who really, yeah, you should feel guilty, what a terrible thing you did, then maybe we need to go to people who will affirm us. So everything in moderation, you can say. So guilt is necessary, but too much of it can be damaging. And especially if we look at religious history, there is guilt has been used to manipulate people. The Catholic Church was famous. We are all guilty because of Adam's original sin, and therefore the Catholic Church manipulated and controlled people. One more thing is that our bhakti, Krishna says, bhajatam priti purvakam. Krishna doesn't want us to practice bhakti out of guilt. That might be initial motivation. We as devotees are quite expert at guilting others into devotion. Prabhupada worked so hard to write his books. Can't you spend some time to read his books? So, okay, that may be yena kena prakarena mana Krishna devesha, you can say somehow or the other practice bhakti, that's good. But ultimately, it's like, we say we should feel grateful. And then, yeah, we should feel grateful, but sometimes in the name of making others feel grateful, we make them feel dreadful for not feeling grateful. So that kind of devotion is not very pleasing to Krishna. It is still devotion because we are doing devotional activities. So guilt motivated devotion will not lead to much realization. Krishna says, bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam. So that's why even if we have done something for which we should feel guilty, but even then, when we practice bhakti, it should be out of attraction for Krishna. It means, say, I did something terrible, so I'll chant 4 rounds extra, I'll chant 8 rounds extra. That's good. It's good in one sense. But chant 4 rounds extra, 8 rounds extra because we are attracted to Krishna. Or when we read Bhagavatam, because we are attracted to Bhagavatam. So we need to have a positive element more than negative element. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions. One is regarding this slide that we have here, regarding following rules and not following rules. So where does, if we put it in the spectrum, where do we see like pure devotees or pure devotional service? Where does it lie? Is it that following all, like as you advance in Krishna consciousness, you become more rules oriented, or you follow the basic rules regulations, but at the same time you also have that heart where I'm doing it for the pleasure of Krishna.
Yeah. So does one become more and more diligent in following rules as they advance? Well, it depends. What I mean is that ultimately bhakti is not about rules, it's about a relationship with Krishna. And once we connect with the person, Krishna, more and more, then inside itself we understand what will please Krishna. And then we naturally orient our life around doing that. And it's not, let's take 2 examples. Somebody may say that I'm a very serious sadhaka. So every day, whatever happens, I'll wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I'll complete my japa before the sun rises. Or before I take one morsel of food, I'll complete my japa. Now that's strict. That's in sadhana, it is good. Now somebody else may be very motivated by their desire to serve Krishna to share Krishna Bhakti with others. And quite often sharing Krishna Bhakti means we may have late night programs. If somebody is very inquisitive, we want to answer their questions, we want to be open. And so that person may sometimes sleep at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. And then it's not humanly possible. Once or twice is okay. But you're sleeping late, you can't wake up early. It will ruin our health sooner or later. So is it that somebody who is staying awake till 1 o'clock, and maybe they wake up at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, a little later in the day, is it that one person is less serious and more serious? Others more serious? Not necessarily. But they are serious about different aspects of bhakti. So somebody is more serious about their sadhana, somebody is more serious about their seva. Now is one thing better than the other? Not necessarily. Krishna can inspire different devotees in different ways. So we will say that those who are dedicated devotees, those who are exalted devotees, they will be focused on the purpose of serving Krishna. Now, how exactly they will serve Krishna, that may vary according to their particular nature, according to how Krishna inspires them, according to the nature of their service. It may vary. So that's why there has to be you could say, a broadness in our understanding of Krishna consciousness. What happens is, for all of us, we may get strength by certain things. Like some devotees may feel that when I wake up in the morning and I chant my rounds early in the morning, that's when I feel that I'm doing something serious for Krishna. That's why I'm serious about Bhakti. Somebody else may feel that I spend time answer people's question and I can see the light going on their eyes. And I can see them very inspired to connect with Krishna. That's what makes my life feel meaningful. That's what makes me feel that I'm alive, I'm doing something worthwhile, man. I'm doing something for Krishna. So both are valuing Krishna, but their way of valuing Krishna is different. That's why we can't have one set of parameters for evaluating the seriousness of all devotees. Does that answer your question?
So the second question I had was regarding this, the last one that you mentioned about not making others become dreadful, but have them be grateful. And sometimes that also, not to make others feel guilty, but now imagine the world where nobody is telling each other. Like you brought up the example of Srila Prabhupada wrote this book for us to read, so please read, at least something every day. But if nobody tells, okay, here, please do this, it's good for...
No, please do this is not guilting people. How can you not read Prabhupada's books? Can't you do this much for Prabhupada? So there's a way. Yes, of course, everybody needs to be pushed. Without that, it will not be able to move forward. Prabhupada says, my Guru Maharaj pushed me, I push you, you push others. How is the pushing parampara? So everybody needs to be pushed in bhakti. There's no doubt. But how it is pushed, that is important. So guilting people into doing some things is sometimes it's okay, but there's a standard mode of practicing bhakti that doesn't work very well.
But that's not in our control, right? Even by saying please, that might...
No, so there's a difference. Somebody may take it that way, that we can't control that so much. But what we need to do is emphasize the positive aspects. Like, if you read Prabhupada's books, your mind will be so much calmer, you'll be able to take wiser decisions, you'll be able to see Krishna acting in your life. You'll yourself feel strong and nourished. So focus on the positives. Yes, Prabhu.
Sometimes Prabhupada's books also emphasize a lot of rules and regulations.
Yeah, of course.
And then, so when we read and his letters to temple presidents, make sure morning program, chanting 16 rounds, and if you are not following, then others will not follow. Like that, there are so many things. So then the thing becomes like, okay, our founder Acharya is saying that these rules are very important, and we get so much into this.
Yeah. See, one of the challenges with understanding Srila Prabhupada is that Prabhupada is so multifaceted. Prabhupada dealt with different situations, different people in different ways. And say, for example, that like this with respect to sadhana or with respect to standards. Prabhupada, if somebody is sannyasi and the sannyasi had problems, we have Prabhupada wrote in the Bhagavatam purport in the 7th canto, in the 8th canto, Gajendra pastime. That is, if you can't be situated in one situation, go to another situation. So Prabhupada was very, very accommodating in that way. And we can find Prabhupada being very strict on occasions, but you can find Prabhupada making room or making accommodation for people when they needed it. So in many examples, it depends on what we're looking at. Like Prabhupada would say that, Prabhupada would often proudly say that these Western people are wearing dhoti kurta and sari now. But when the devotees are going for distribution, they said that if you wear dhoti kurta and sari, we will be distributing half of the books. So they wear Western clothes. So now we can say this is not about, now Prabhupada talk about chanting 16 rounds or falling for it. These are important things. And still we see that there were devotees who, during Prabhupada's times, many of his disciples could not chant 16 rounds. Especially those devotees who were of a little more like adventurous kind of nature. Satsuru Maharaj writes in Lilamrita that there are two groups of devotees. Those who were very serious in practicing bhakti, they were mostly in New York. Those devotees who went to San Francisco, they were more like outgoing. They just wanted to do big things for Krishna, but they are not very strict about the rules. But Prabhupada accepted both of them. I have talked with several Srila Prabhupada disciples who knew other devotees who were not chanting 16 rounds. And Prabhupada, there's no incident of Prabhupada confronting a devotee. How you have taken a vow, how dare you not chant 16 rounds? Now, there are incidents that Prabhupada takes and talks in a letter. There are a couple of letters where Prabhupada says, what is the value of your word? You have taken a vow in front of the deities. But when he would meet devotees individually, he would talk with them. Okay, what happened? Okay, then I'm not saying this is a license to stop. They're not chanting 16 rounds. That's not my point. My point is that, not at all. My point is that Prabhupada was, as the CC says, like heavier than thunderbolt and softer than a rose. So based on, again, what would be good for the devotee. So my purpose is not at all to here downplay or dismiss the importance of rules. It's just that rules should not blind us to the relationship. Normally, rules are the way to develop the relationship. Normally, that's what is required. And instead of thinking of those in terms of rules, we could just talk it in terms of the relationship itself. Now, whenever we relate with any person, we try to understand what are their likes and dislikes. And then we, at least to some extent, mold our life accordingly. Now, of course, some people mold their life in such a way that they deliberately do the thing that the other person dislikes. That is just to provoke them. But if they really want a healthy relationship, we all mold our life accordingly. So that's just natural. And you may say that I'm not following a rule. Well, that's what effectively you're doing. If I think this person gets displeased with me and therefore I should not do those things, that's like an unwritten rule for me. So we can't, by no means can we say that rules and relationships have nothing to do with each other. They are significantly connected. Committing to any relationship means following a set of rules. Some may be explicitly written, some may be unwritten. But sometimes the rules can impede the relationship. And here that's what Krishna is emphasizing in this verse, that even if somebody is not able to follow the rules, if they intend to continue in the relationship, I appreciate that. So that is the danger of the human mind. When one thing is emphasized over the other thing can be completely trivialized. But that is not the point over here. If A and B are important, if we emphasize A is more important than B, relationships are more important than the rules. But that does not mean B is unimportant. Rules are important. Rules are important because rules are essential for A in many ways. But if there is a choice, there has to be a choice between A and B, then A has to be prioritized. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Yes, Prabhu.
In the example with Lord Shiva, Lord Shiva had a way to he glorified Krishna because Krishna was in person. But for the person who is bound with the anchor, he couldn't say, oh, because this is Krishna's material energy, and he couldn't glorify material energy, or he can, but how can you compare the two cases? It's very difficult.
No, the point is not to compare the two cases. The point is to illustrate that of Lord Shiva as an example of Sudurachara and Ananyabhak going together. That there is a terrible action, but there is also strong devotion. How both of them can go together, that is an example of that. Now, in our case, that same literally can't work. It is.
What would be the base that we can probably make us enthusiastic again? Like for Lord Shiva, he glorified it and he.
No, so for us, say suppose this happened in the early days, Prabhupada had started the Sunday feast. And Prabhupada had got the devotees to cook. And they cooked the Sunday feast and it was so delicious that before the Sunday feast started, they ate everything themselves. And when the guests came, there was nothing left for them. Now, Prabhupada was quite unhappy about that. Now somebody can say, hey, why did you eat it all? It was so delicious. Well, okay, it is delicious, that is good, but that doesn't give you the right to eat everything. So there are times when we can't just say that this is so attractive, therefore I did this. Well, we are expected to have some level of self-discipline. But the point is that how will that self-discipline come? It will not come by giving up bhakti. It will come by taking up bhakti more seriously. So in that sense, if you understand that the opportunity to serve Krishna still remains. This was an opportunity, I had made a complete mess of this. In fact, that opportunity I made into a catastrophe. And that was a terrible thing. But Krishna is so kind that the opportunity to serve him still remains. And therefore, I will take that opportunity. This is not whitewashing what wrong I did. It is not a big thing. It is just a small thing. No, not like that. It was a serious thing. But Krishna is so kind that even when I did something so seriously wrong, Krishna still gives me the opportunity to serve him. And therefore, I will take that opportunity. So we focus on, again, we don't have to trivialize the wrongdoing to emphasize doing right now. Yes, the wrongdoing can be still serious, but no matter how serious the wrongdoing is, Krishna is so kind. Krishna is still giving me opportunity to serve. Does that answer your question?
Second question is about that, like the people that you said you can making you enthusiastic, or like they are making you more dread, more bad feeling in Krishna consciousness. You said we could avoid that association. Sometimes we are not able to avoid the association. So, what would be?
Yes, sometimes we can't avoid the association of people who make us feel bad. Well, that is the way we get some of our karma. We all have some karma, some quota that we have to face. And it's just that sometimes this is a question that comes. How can a devotee speak like this? How can a devotee behave in such a terrible way? So what happens is that sometimes we all feel hurt by devotees, and sometimes it happens that we feel more hurt by the actions of other devotees than the actions of other people who are not devotees. You say, how can a devotee speak like this? How can a devotee do like this? Well, yes, that's true at one level. But we can say that by our past karma, we all have certain amount of suffering we have to go through. And there's Adhyatmik, Adi Bhautik, Adi Daivik. All these three kleshas are there. So if we largely live in the association of devotees, then the Adi Bhautik klesh that we are meant to go through will have to come through devotees only. Isn't it? So where will it come from? It has to come from some devotees only. So that's why sometimes it can be quite traumatizing. So at that time, you just have to see that, okay, this is not, rather than seeing that this is a devotee doing this is just my own karma coming to me. And okay, because it came through this devotee, I cannot really be very close to the devotee right now. But let me continue practicing bhakti with other devotees.
And also third, sorry for and also sometimes we think that making
Now you are
last question, Prabhu. Sometimes we feel that making others feel dreadful or like bad is the only way to convince them. So how?
Yeah, that's what I said. Sometimes that is the only way. And sometimes if somebody has done something bad and they're not feeling bad, then that is a problem. And sometimes we all need to be jolted. So it's like the initial impetus for taking to devotion or starting a particular activity, even if that is to kill, that is okay. Like Krishna says, Artho, Jigyasur, Artharthi. All those kind of people also come to him. But eventually they become devoted to him because Vasudeva Sarvamiti. Because Krishna is so attractive. They may come out of distress, they may come out of seeking wealth, just seeking some information, but eventually they become devoted. So yes, initial impetus sometimes that's what may be required. But then we also have to see what is the effect on people. If they start thinking that we are simply manipulating them and they become more antagonistic, then we have to avoid that completely. See, our intention is important, but others' perception is also important. Because the perceiving, we are not trying to manipulate them, we are only trying to inspire them, motivate them. But if they see our attempt to motivate them as an attempt to manipulate them, then maybe we can't use that strategy with them. No, not only maybe, we should not use that particular approach with them. Yes, Prabhu.
So in this Abhichet Sudurachara verse, so if repeatedly Durachara is happening, but the person is trying to be coming back to the right path, but Durachara is happening, does Krishna still consider that person as saintly, or is it, because in the purport Prabhupada says if he doesn't improve in his character, then he's not.
Prabhupada is not a devotee of a high standard.
High standard.
That's an interesting thing. Not just a devotee, the devotee not of a high standard, Prabhupada says. So, somebody does not improve, they keep relapsing. Well, again, my understanding is it's very difficult to know what a person is going through. And is it that they are getting swept away because there is such a giant wave, or is it because they are swimming in the direction of the wave? It's very difficult to know, because like somebody is say alcoholic, somebody is an addict. We may say, just have more willpower, give it up. Well, yes and no, because we don't know what kind of pressure and torment they are feeling inside their head when that conditioning, that urge is coming, that is goading them. So ultimately it will have to boil down to sincerity between that person and Krishna. And of course, if somebody is doing something repeatedly seriously wrong, then maybe that person should not be in some significant leadership positions. That person can practice bhakti, but that person cannot be an example of how to practice bhakti for everyone. That person will become an example of how not to practice bhakti. So that kind of leadership position has to be avoided. This is always a challenge. Like I remember in Back to Godhead, I am one of the editors of Back to Godhead. So there was this devotees who do prison outreach, and that there was this story of one person who was in prison, and he started practicing bhakti and became a very serious devotee. He started preaching to others, and he sort of created quite a significant number of devotees in the prison. So it was a very inspiring story, and it had come to us for review, and we said, yeah, this story looks good. But then I made the point, in this entire story it's not mentioned why was he in the prison. So maybe we need to find that out. And then that person, from which place he was, the BT editor sent a letter to that temple president, do you know this person? And then they said that this was many years before, but he had apparently molested a devotee girl from the congregation, and that's why he was put in jail. Now, and that temple president said that, please don't put this story in the temple, because they are a part of our community, and how will they feel if you glorify that person? Then the devotees who had preached to them, the devotee who had gone to the president and preached to them, he says, bhakti is a process of reformation. Why focus on his past? See that he has reformed right now. So we had to make a decision. What do you focus on in this particular situation? So our decision, we decided not to publish that story. We said that we appreciate that he has transformed, and we appreciate that he has done something wonderful. But some actions in the past may be such that, not that they cannot be forgiven, Krishna can give forgiveness, but public glorification, like we are putting a particular story in the Bhagavad, in the BTG, we are publicly glorifying. He said we can't do that. So that devotee, he said, you don't have that devotee, the preacher, he said, you don't have faith in the potency of bhakti. He says bhakti purifies, and those purified by bhakti is considered to be he was quoting the same verse, sadhureva samantavya. He says we are not talking right now about the stature of this devotee right now. We are talking here about the impact of this on our movement, on our devotees. Krishna also says, na buddhi bhedam janayet ajnanam karma sanginam. Don't disturb the minds of others. Anudvega karam vakyam. Speak in a way that does not agitate others. So there are other principles also to be considered. So a devotee is one, yasman no dvijate loko, lokan no dvijate chaya. That one who does not disturb the mind of others, and one is not disturbed by others. So if this is going to disturb the mind of devotees, then we have to consider that. So should we be disturbing the minds of devotees? Nobody is stopping that devotee from practicing bhakti. Nobody is stopping them from glorifying, from continuing to share bhakti with others. But in a particular forum, we may decide, no, we cannot glorify this particular person. So these are decisions which have to be taken into time, place, circumstance. So I'm not sure whether I exactly addressed that question, but my point was that yes, if somebody is doing repeatedly so I gave an example of some wrong from the past that might be so serious that may create an obstacle in some things in the present. But similarly, if some wrong is going on, that can also create some obstacles in the present. We won't say that bhakti itself has to be stopped, but particular forms of bhakti may need to be stopped. So that something is understandable. So I hope that answers the question. So yes.
Suppose being a devotee, we always or our friends, they should follow the bhakti like us, or they should also join like this, and then we say them all these things, and then we means if they do this, then slowly we force them to do this, do that, follow these principles and our four regulatory principles. Then is it we are going in rise in Krishna consciousness or rise out of that? Because if other person is not liking that, so
That's a big question. Let me see if I can find something over here. No. Yeah. This is a whole seminar I had in Sydney on how to deal with different kinds of people, in family members who are not devotees. No, not this one. Really? Where did this go? Yeah, slide 19. So, what happened? Okay. Yeah. So basically, you can say Krishna, we, and say the person whom we are related with. So you can say consider there are three different relationships. So when we are practicing bhakti, say one is strong with us, and we want three to develop. Three is the person whom we are in a relationship. We want them to have a relationship with Krishna, and two is our relationship with them. Now the ideal is 1, 2, and 3 all grow together. That they are devoted to Krishna, we are devoted to Krishna, and we come together in devotion to Krishna. That's the best situation. But sometimes we may be very strong about 1, but they may not all interested in 3. They may not be interested in their relationship with Krishna. So in such a situation, what do we do? See, if we put too much pressure for 3, then what happens is that creates a tension in 2. Because we appear to be imposing, demanding, expecting too much. And then when there is a tension in 2, and especially if it's a close relationship, it's an important relationship for us, then a tension in 2 will also create adverse effect in 1. If we have a lot of tension in our home and we sit down to chant, we can't really focus on Krishna while chanting. So in such a situation, we may just have to decide to separate 1 and 2 and leave 3 to Krishna. Now, we certainly can push a little bit. We can invite them and remind them. But if they show no interest, in fact they show opposition, they show constant reluctance, then leave 3 to Krishna. And then treat 1 and 2 as separate. That means we make our time for practicing bhakti, and then we do what is required in our relationship with them. And in that way, generally speaking, in today's world, if we don't impose ourselves on others, others won't impose themselves on us. So if we don't force 3, okay, you do what you want in your life, then they will let us do 1 also, peacefully. And then over a period of time, if we are doing our part in the relationship well, too properly, and they will see that. Say, okay, you have become more patient, more understanding, more helpful. You used to be so irritable or this or that. Those things have gone down. And they will see, how has this change happened? Could it be because you are practicing this bhakti? Maybe there's something good and I want to try it out. And then they may explore their 3. So we need to focus on 1 and 2. Yeah, don't push too much, because if you push too much, it can backfire, and it will not only not damage. Not only will their relationship with Krishna not happen, but even our relationship with Krishna and our relationship with them can get weakened by that. Okay, it takes time. Krishna has given everyone free will, and Krishna doesn't force anyone. So we can't force others too much. Okay, thank you.
This is a great slide, Prabhu. I was just thinking that if the demand in point number 2 is so much that even one is affected, then in that case,
Means from the other side to us.
well, yeah, I mean, there are to maintain the relationship and to.
No, then that way every relationship has boundaries. Relationship has those two things: bonds and boundaries. Bond is what connects us, and boundaries are, everybody in every relationship, even leave alone devotional relationship, ordinary relationship, there are boundaries. Without boundaries, you cannot have a relationship, meaningful relationship. Yeah, okay, this is what I plan to do, and then the other person says, forget your plans and come with me. Well, okay, yes, no. So it's not going to work like that. So boundaries are there in every relationship. So then exactly what will be the boundaries, that will vary from person to person, relationship to relationship, even time to time. But we have to have boundaries in every relationship. Okay. So, okay.
In family life, when some family members are not too much inclined towards the devotional service, and as we spoke before also regarding the behavior of patients. So the members who are very inclined towards devotional service and are not making an attempt to advance in their and at times because we cannot be perfect, but at most of the times people are judgmental. So when we exhibit certain behavior, they immediately start judging that better seeing you following this from this long time, and you have not we have not seen a positive change, and that kinds of demotivate them also to better they did not start the journey itself. So how to avoid this kind of situation? And
it's a sad reality. Sometimes when we become devotees, we often, especially if we start teaching, we start sharing bhakti with others, they say, I made so many people into devotees, so many people became devotees because of me. And we may count that very proudly, but we hardly ever keep count of how many people did not become devotees because of me. Because of the way I behaved, because of the way I acted and presented the picture of Krishna Bhakti, so many people may not have become devotees because of me. So that part is also sadly true. But 2-3 things. First is that if some particular thing is especially important for the other person, for a person with whom we are in an important relationship, then we try to give priority for that. Because what happens is, everybody sees others from particular parameters. Like some people are extremely conscious of cleanliness, and we may do 100 things that they tell us to do. But if you don't keep our room clean, they'll forget all the 100 things that you didn't do this. So if something is important for someone, we need to put special efforts for doing that. So somebody may think, okay, whatever you may keep your promises, not keep your promises, you may do things, you not do things, but you should never raise your voice. If you raise your voice, that means you have no self-control. Well, okay, if that's their parameter. So we have to try to understand what is important for the other person in the relationship, and we try to make efforts to work on that. So we can't, we have hundreds of things which we can work on, but we can't work all of them. But we have to shortlist what is important. And if something is especially important for another person, then we need to put some special energy in that. We may have lots of things to do in bhakti also, in our professional life, in our social life, but some particular things if we put in. And how do we know what is important for the other person? 2 simple ways. One is, what is it that they appreciate us a lot if we do it? And what is it that they criticize us a lot if we don't do it? So by those two things we can understand this is especially important for that person. And then we try to do that. Now, if they are overbearing and over demanding, then we can't do much about it. But sometimes some things are important for those persons, and then if we just do them, then they start appreciating. So instead of being defensive or aggressive, that we just try to understand and try to prioritize that as much as we can. Another thing could be that sometimes sometimes it happens that we are their only connection with Krishna, in the sense that they are not connected with the devotee community at all, they are not connected, then we are the only connection. But if we can connect them with other devotees, even if they are not interested in bhakti, maybe somebody is from the same profession, maybe somebody is from the same regional background, then they have multiple connections with Krishna. So even if their connection through us gets a little strained, they will not necessarily become disconnected from Krishna by that. And their connection with other Krishna devotees doesn't have to be a Krishna conscious connection. It could just be a social connection, professional connection. Just connecting people that way is also helpful. Okay? Thank you. So regarding your question, okay, we can do that last question. So are you coming for tomorrow's class, Prabhu, and yes?
Probably, yeah.
Okay, then we could discuss that topic in tomorrow's class. That also is for, we could, otherwise, okay, yeah, we'll try to address it tomorrow in detail, okay? Yes, Prabhu, last question.
Sumitra Mataji is asking, Hare Krishna Prabhu, this is Sumitra. How do we reconcile conflicting statements? For example, one who is not put into anxiety is very dear to me, seems to contradict with one who is equipoised in honor and distress is dear to me. These standards seem lofty and impossible. Are these aspirational goals that one day can be achieved in one's lifetime, but we make a conscious effort to develop these qualities?
Okay. So these two questions over here. How do we reconcile contradictory statements, and are these standards too high for us to follow? Well, with respect to contradictory statements, it's a whole big subject. My understanding is that statements, we often think of two things. Either a statement is absolute or a statement is relative. And you say, no, we cannot relativize scriptural statements. No, but between absolutizing a statement and relativizing a statement is contextualizing the statement. It is true, but maybe in this particular context statement was made. So if you learn to look at context, then it's relatively not so difficult to reconcile contradictory statements. Usually, see the same principle, like the standard example I give is that in traffic rules are meant to make sure that people can drive smoothly and safely. Now, if you consider the purpose of all traffic rules all over the world is the same. But the specific traffic rules in India and America are opposite. So, on which side of the road you travel, it's opposite in India and America. So the rules can be opposite, the purpose can be the same. So now why are the rules opposite? Well, that's context. Historically there could be reasons, geographically there are many historical reasons. That when America got independence from from UK, America wanted to assert that we are different from those who ruled us. And that's why many things they did opposite to what was done in UK. India got independence, but India still stayed a part of the Commonwealth. So, although there was no Commonwealth actually, all the wealth was in Europe or UK only. But still, so there are historical reasons. If you look at the context, things can be reconciled. Now, regarding these, are they aspirational standards? Well, yes. That we could say that many of the statements in the Bhagavad-Gita are both descriptive and prescriptive. They are describing the characteristics of those who are seers, those who are siddhas. And their prescriptive means they are providing a prescription or a pathway for those who are seekers. So, yes, exactly, we cannot stay equipoised in happiness and distress. But we could say that the magnitude of the up and down That can also, if that decreases also. So if I am happy, I just get elated, and if I am unhappy, I just get dejected completely. It's like some days I feel, why chant 16 rounds? I want to chant 1600 rounds. And the other day, why chant 16 rounds? I've chanted 16 mantras. That's enough. So we don't have to. So even if that magnitude, the up and down, even that decreases slightly, that itself can bring some significant level of stability in our life. So even if we are taking small steps in that direction, that's also good for us. So that's how we can keep moving forward. Okay. So thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavad-Gita. In the pandemic, I started 12 books, but I could not complete any of them. So these were some books I completed just recently. So much of what I spoke was from this book, Bhagavad-Gita Insights. So these two are my recent books. This is Bhagavad-Gita Insights and Relishing Bhagavad-Gita. They both contain about 100 articles, and like not this diagram. This is diagrams coming on one of my future books, but similar illustrations like these. There are like the Kula Dharma and Kshatriya Dharma is our illustration. Like that, there are 80 illustrations in both these books approximately. So the Bhagavad-Gita Insights approaches the Gita from a more rational perspective. What are the typical questions we may get when we study the Gita? If we are detached, then won't we become hard-hearted? Won't we become responsible? What does detachment mean? If Krishna controls everything, then do we really have free will? So, if we say knowledge and ignorance are opposite, so how can there be knowledge in the mode of ignorance? So questions that we may get while reading the Bhagavad Gita, those questions are answered. In each article, like an answer to a question. And this approaches Gita from a relational perspective. That means the relationship between Krishna and Arjuna, how it is manifested in the Bhagavad Gita. So when Arjuna is making a particular statement, what is his mood, what are his thoughts, what are his emotions? And so the connection of the Gita with the Mahabharata, where the stories of where Krishna and Arjuna's relationship is described much more. So this is especially if you want to know more of the Gita from a personal perspective. This is very devotionally nourishing. This can be a little more intellectually satisfying. And then this is Bhagavad Gita 365 reflections. This is more from an applicational perspective. I had another book earlier, Gita for Daily Enrichment. That's a different book. So this has how do we grow through adversities, or how do we learn to resist temptations, or how do we become more sensitive in our speech, how do we become less judgmental in our relationship with others, how do we see Krishna in our day-to-day life. There are sections like this, about 7 sections. Each of those have about 40-50 articles. So this is Bhagavad Gita for Daily Mindfulness, and this is a calendar with 365 quotes. So these are inspired by the Bhagavad Gita, and each of these is based on a particular verse of the Gita. And if you Google the quote, you will find an article on GitaDaily.com about this. But the quotes themselves are self-explanatory, and this is a very non-intrusive way of sharing bhakti with others. Just keep a calendar on your desktop, on your desk, on office or home, and any colleagues, relatives, guests come, they look at a quote. Hey, what is this quote about? And then you get the opportunity to discuss philosophy. So these 4 books are available, or these 4 things are available. Each of these 3 are $15, and this is a bigger book. This is 25. We take all 4 of them. It's together for 60. And we have PayPal and Zelle also, if you want. And books are there. More are there outside.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
And tomorrow we have